and welcome back to the Colour Cave, where we like to play with art stuff. My name is Jem, and today we are back here with our lovely little penguins, and we are going to tackle some water. You can see from last time I have finished off my homework, these left-hand rocks. I just wanted to point out something that I've done on this side that I did not do on this side. The first thing you'll notice is there is a lot more of the slate grey, so that's the bluish grey colour, and that is simply because these rocks are much like flatter, as if someone's like taken these ones and gone like that. So you notice that they do look significantly different colour wise, but also if I just zoom in here a little bit, you can see there's patches here where I've got really dark areas. So what I've done is put a little bit of a cast shadow. And again, I did this here because the rocks are flat. So there is going to be some sort of like coming from this background and heading this way. So I just thought it'd be nice to add that in. It wasn't really appropriate to do that on this side just because the rocks are a completely different shape. And I feel that these shadows would be cut off because a lot of these rocks are like, you know, pointing up like this. So I just wanted to show you that before we move on to our underwater area. So the first thing we want to think about is what this is going to look like. This is not a typical view that a normal person would have of a scene like this. There are some places where the water is very clear, but you'd have to have some sort of underwater camera. So we have to kind of take that into account. Now there's a couple of ways you can tackle something like this to make it look like it's underwater, if that's the kind of thing that you want to go for. And I'm going to use a combination of two methods. Number one is when you choose your colours, go a shade lighter than what you would pick if it was above water. So for example here, the rocks, if you're going to go with the darkest part of your rocks, which was our dark grey, the 70% grey, you would go a step up from that and go to 50. You can use that kind of rule of thumb or just pick a lighter colour. The other thing that you can do, which is great with Prismacolors as well, is you can use a white pencil to go over the top of everything, and that will automatically lift it and lighten it up. That is the method I'm going to use. A white pencil is something I don't use very often, but it's a really great method for this type of thing. So today what we're going to do is we're going to tackle the actual water section here, which includes these waves and everything. And again, I'll probably stop at the edge of the page and just do this right hand side. But I am going to bring this down to where all the plants and things stop, because I'm going to do that separately along with the penguins in the last video next week. So that is where we are headed. So the pencils I'm using today are actually a selection of the pencils we've already used with the addition of 2 extra pencils. So the previous pencils are the ones we've used in the clouds and the rocks. So we have the slate grey, which is PC 936, the 70% cool grey, PC 1065, and muted turquoise, which is PC 1088. In addition to that, I do have the white pencil, which is PC 938. And we also have this colour here, which is light aqua. You can see there it is a very greenish turquoise colour. And that is PC 992. So that is what we're going to work with today. So I'm going to give you a quick demonstration of what these rocks are going to look like. When I was thinking about how we're going to colour this, I've actually split this into 2 sections in my mind. So if I just zoom it out a little bit so you can see what's going on here. The first section is the section that actually contains the active parts of the surface of the water, and you can see right across the picture that creates a band almost all the way across right through. And then the section under that is obviously the bottom part of these rocks and the water underneath, and that goes down to this area at the bottom where the plants start. So that's where I'm going to stop what we're doing, and that's the area plus the penguins are going to look at next time. Get all my pencils over. I might have to get a pencil extender for my white. It's looking pretty sad there. So when I'm thinking about the rocks, we want to use a sort of similar procedure, if you like, to what we did up here. So if I just grab this slate grey, we don't want the colours to be as dark or as intense. So if you see here, in these darker areas, I'm actually just going to work my way around the plants for now, but I'm still going rock by rock. So you can see I'm using the slate grey over the hatched areas exactly the same way as I did before up here. It's just a much lighter layer. And then I can take my darker colour, and that's going to be for the really shadowy areas, but again I'm not pressing very hard. I'm just going to pop a tiny little bit of that down. And then instead of using the light grey like I did up here, which I think that was the 30% we used, this is where I'm going to use my muted turquoise instead. And I'm going to pop a layer of that down just in there. And that's just to really help with this feeling of that, of, you know, where we're under the water. So now that I've mapped those out, I can just go in and bolden those colours up a little bit, because remember we are going to go over it with our white pencil. I've got a funny feeling that these little fish that are going past here are going to be a really bright colour. So there's the muted turquoise. Just get a little bit more of that down in between my little plant parts here. So you can see it bears a resemblance to what's going on up here, but it's got a much more sort of bluish tinge to it. This one in here looks a lot darker, so we can go a bit harder with our slate grey and our 70% if that's what we want to do. And you can see I'm stopping there at that water surface part that I was just talking about. That's like my cut-off point. I talked a lot in the last couple of videos about making pieces of work like this into bite-sized chunks so that it's not overwhelming. I'm glad that some of you found that information helpful, like I really am, because I really hate it when I hear people say, no, I've got this book and I don't want to touch it. It's like, yeah, touch it, that's what it's for touching. So now we've got a little bit of colour there. This is when we take our white pencil. Now, obviously I would go all the way across, I think, and then go back over with my white pencil. But I just want to show you what this is going to do. I am going to press quite hard, and I'm deliberately working my way over the black line work with the pencil as well. And you can see it gives it this sort of slight smudgy technique. And it just softens everything out a little bit, and it just helps with that idea that this is under the water. Obviously it's smoothing the colour out as well because we're pressing quite hard. But if I zoom right in now, I'm hoping that you can see that the difference between this half and this half, it's much, much softer. And it's given it not a murky appearance, but kind of a murky appearance. And it's just really helpful when you are wanting to get an underwater feel. There's loads of different ways to do it, but this is a really quick and easy way to do it. So that's what we're going to do, and we're going to go all the way across with this technique. And I mean, you can get through this fairly quickly. Now that I've explained it, I can sort of chunter my way across here quite quickly, and it shouldn't be too much hassle. So I'm going to make a little start on that. I like how Kerby's actually put like sort of curly squiggly lines in some places. I really like that. A little bit of variation on the old texture there. So there's going to be a lot of the muted turquoise here. This is a really wide open area. I'll try and work my way down the penguins. We'll deal with the penguins later. It's interesting as well because down here there are some sets of lines that are kind of open to interpretation. They could be plants, but they could also pass as shadow areas on these rocks, and that's quite interesting. I've gone for shadow. I might be completely wrong, but you could easily, you know, sort of manipulate that to suit yourself, to whatever you want, you know, what kind of feel you were going for with your underwater scene. Lots of little bubbles here. I'm not being too careful around the bubbles because I can just put them back in with a Posca pen. That's not really a problem. Managed to get a pip. I don't know how I've got a pippy here there. She's not anywhere in the vicinity. She's outside baking. It's super warm here today. It's like 27 degrees Celsius. So that's going to be what? That's going to be what, 80 something Fahrenheit? I don't know my Fahrenheits. Yeah, it was close, 80.6 Fahrenheit. So that equals very warm for Scotland. It might not be super warm for wherever you live in the world, but that is plenty warm for us. Plenty warm. So Pip thought it might be a nice idea to try and lie outside for a wee while. I think she's going to last about 4 seconds. There are areas of shade she can lie in. She chooses not to because she's stupid. That seems to be a collie thing as well. They're supposed to be intelligent dogs, but they don't know how to lie in the shade. So I am fully anticipating her being back inside in approximately 3.5 minutes. So we'll see, will we? I'll time her. Jock does quite well in the heat. He's good in the heat. Pip not so much. That was me, that stroke that I did there, that was actually a hand spasm that I managed to control before it got out of control. That was funny, I've not had one of those for a while. My hand's generally a lot better behaved in the summer months when it's warm, just because it's not so stiff, and I don't know, I think it makes my nerve endings tweak less. I'm not entirely sure how that works, but It's generally just not as tight and not as painful as well. In the winter it can get pretty sore sometimes and I just get a bit pissed off with it. The spasms are definitely more frequent in the winter as well. There's absolutely no doubt about that, like 100%. Because I was talking ages ago about dropping cutlery, which is much like a more recent thing, and that is rife in the winter now, but in the summer it's not such a big deal for some reason. I don't know. I do normally, before I do something like this, when I'm going to be in this kind of like, you know, like contracted position, I do warm my hand up and do exercises before I start. I've got one of those little squeezy grip things and I've got a couple of like stress ball type things as well, and then you do all these exercises as well. Like I can't feel that in those fingers, but I obviously watch them doing. And doing those exercises really, really helps, like it really does, because it stops me, especially with paintbrushes and markers, you know, because the main spasm that I have is like this kind of movement, and it makes me throw things. And if you've got a paintbrush, you end up with marks across your paper. So doing those exercises really helps minimise those things. But just now it's grand, so that's the good thing about weather like this. It's like, no problem, don't worry about it, everything's fine. I don't know what I'm going to do with this bit down here. It's very scribbly in there. Very scribbly indeed. Okay, I think I'm going to take a rest from those pencils and I'm going to carry on with my white pencil. I'm going to get a pencil extender as well because this is getting a wee bit too weeny. I have packed a lot of the cave away. It's starting to get quite echoey in here now. I suppose it's a cave, so I suppose that's okay. And when I was putting away my, I've got like a wooden caddy that's got 3 ducats in it, and I was putting all the stuff away there, and my pencil extenders were in there, and I was like, I'm just going to leave those out because I'm using Prismacolors, and I'm really glad I did. Right, okay, that should be a bit easier on the old hand as well. Oh, that's Pippin. I was 3 minutes. That was pretty good. I was accurate. I know my dog well. Yeah, so kind of use this if you've ever used a colourless blender. You're kind of using your white pencil in the same way, so pretty heavy pressure, and a circular motion is the most efficient way you're going to get through this. Now remember, when you're doing this, you are going to have to avoid your fish and everything. You don't want that white pencil over your penguins or your fish, because we're going to go back and colour them, and if you're pressing down really hard, you're going to squash the tooth of the paper, which means it's not going to be receptive to taking any more colour when it comes to filling in our penguins. So that's something to note as well. I mean, it doesn't have to be pinpoint accurate. You know, we're in the business of having fun colouring here. We're not in the business of trying to make things as painful as possible. You know, but you can kind of like pay a little bit of attention to what's going on there. So these little fish that are going along here, I think we want them to be really nice colours. Maybe pick up some of the orange in the sky or something. I thought that would be pretty nice. So you can see when you're zoomed out now, you can see that you can tell that these are joined together, like because the colours marry up, but we've got a significantly lighter incarnation, which helps us denote that this part is under the water. I'm going to make some of these plants really bright colours as well. I'm really inspired by my travels to Mauritius for this. The water in Mauritius, because you are surrounded by a coral reef, obviously it's very sheltered, and the water is so clear and it's not very deep. You can be like almost half a mile from the shore and the water's still only like waist level, and you can see your toes and all the fish swimming about and stuff. It's lovely. It's really, really nice, and there's lots of really bright coloured flowers and plant life under the water, like aquatic plant life, and it's just so pretty. I've got a funny story about that actually. We were told to, if we were going to go into the water in Mauritius, again because of the coral, never to go in your bare feet. You're always told to have something on your feet, because if you cut your foot on a piece of coral, it's like glass basically. But also there's sea urchins, and they're very jaggy, they're very spiny, and if you stand on a sea urchin, that is a wholly unpleasant experience. It happened to a gentleman who was staying at the resort that we stayed in, and he had to have every single spine pulled out one by one, and I looked pretty sore. So we had the little water shoes that you get, they're like wetsuit slippers, and they've got a kind of thicker rubber sole on them. So we were wearing those. It was one of the very first days, and I was obsessed with the water, like absolutely obsessed with it, because it's so pretty. And we decided we would take a little wade out towards the edge of the coral, and it was roped off a good distance before the actual reef, for obvious reasons. But the what we called the pedestrian part, so where you could go out and you were away from all the water sports and boats and stuff. And we thought we'll go right the way out, knowing that it wasn't going to be too deep. Because Mr. Jem's very tall compared to me, so he would end up walking and wading and I would end up having to swim, which is fine, but it wasn't that deep anyway. So we did that, and we were looking at things in the water, and Mr. Jem stood on a sea cucumber. Now, I don't want to say what I would liken the defence mechanism of a sea cucumber to. Just look it up on the internet, but it looks remarkably like a human male bodily function, shall we say. And at the time, we didn't know, number one, what it was he'd stood on, and secondly, what this white sticky stuff was that had wrapped itself round his ankle, because we didn't know if it was poisonous or anything. So I have never seen Mr. Jem move that fast in his entire life. He practically walked on water, sprinting back to the shore to try and get his little rubber shoe off, and to try and get this, I can only describe it as Spider-Man web, off of his leg and off of his skin, in case it was abrasive or poisonous. And because obviously Mr. Jem has hair on his legs and it was all stuck in his hair, so when he was pulling it off, it was like waxing his legs at the same time. And honestly, I had zero sympathy because I was in absolute kinks of laughter. I could not stop laughing. So, I looked it up fairly quickly, figured out that it was harmless, and then just sat and watched him be really uncomfortable trying to get this stuff off his leg. Super, super funny. So after that, we learned the reason it happened is that it's quite difficult to tell a sea cucumber, because they look like rocks sitting on the bottom of the water. If they're down in the sand, and obviously Mr. Jem just thought it was a rock. So funny. So that was the start of our honeymoon, and that tickled me no end. But there you go. So you learn your aquatic life before you stand on them, guys, if you're in a foreign country. So we didn't make that mistake again for the rest of the trip. But we saw some really nice fish, and there was all sorts in the water. We were standing watching a man one day who was fishing with a pole as well, like a spear. And because again, the water's shallow, if you've got a talent for that, it's pretty easy to catch. So he was spearing these fish in the shallows, and then he was giving them into the hotel that we were staying at, and they were cooking them. So I think they must have had some sort of deal, because they're very strict with licenses and stuff in Mauritius. Because he had like a badge and everything on. He wasn't just some random dude that had walked along the beach. But they cooked it all, and I think they gave him so much of it back. So very interesting experiences. Right, now we've got these darker rocks in here. I'm just going to leave them. I'm probably just going to stick with the slate grey. Just maybe pop a little bit of that in between, because that shading is super dark. Super, super dark. All this talk about holidays, because you guys were all going on holidays well this last little while. We've decided we're not booking any holidays until we've moved, because Mr. Jem doesn't really know, number one, what harvest is going to look like. At the new place, there is a lot more arable, so a lot more crops than livestock. So harvest is a much bigger deal, and unfortunately it's my least favourite thing about being on a farm. I absolutely hate harvest time, because it just seems to go on forever, and it's too hot, and yeah, there are loads of reasons I don't like it. So Mr. Jem's going to have to figure all that out first. So we will probably be going on holiday much later in the year, like November, which is actually really nice when you live in the UK. If you can go somewhere warm, you come back with a suntan and everyone else is grey and miserable. Right, okay. And on that note, I'm going to go back to my white pencil. We are long overdue. We haven't been abroad since our honeymoon, and we'll have been married 5 years this year. Because we got married not long after starting the cave. It was a pandemic, and here in the UK things were quite strict for almost 2 years in terms of flights, and we just didn't want to risk it for various reasons. So, even at that, you take that out of the equation, we still haven't been on holiday for 3 years. So that will be getting remedied later on in the year, and I cannot wait personally. So that'll give us something to look forward to later on in the year. It's just as well, actually, because we're going to be pretty busy. Obviously, the move's going to cut into a huge chunk of July until we get ourselves sorted and settled and, you know, all that kind of bit. So you're really looking at August before things get going. So that's when harvest's going to be, you know, they'll be starting probably near the end of August. And it's probably going to eat up most of August. I am going to try and get a little visit to Sweden in September, and I'm going to go and see Miss Julia Kay, hopefully. Haven't set anything in stone. Again, need to wait and see about harvest. And then October, I'm doing a little bit of travelling, which I can't talk too much about because it's stuff for the cave. So, yeah, there's something going on in October. And then I'm hoping to go on holiday in November, and then obviously when we get into December, it's that time. So yeah, it's going to be busy. I don't know how I'm going to fit Cavemas in around all that, like the prep and everything, but we'll figure it out. It'll be fine. It'll be okay. You can see there I've got my nice pale underwater rocks there. They're looking lovely. We've got this gap here. There's a couple of things you could do with this, and it really is just down to preference. I'm going to try and tie it in with what I'm going to do with the waves, so I'll show you that first, and then we can tackle that little bit in there. So for this, I'm mainly going to use the light aqua and the muted turquoise. I am going to dampen down the muted turquoise with another blue colour, because one thing we need to do is to get contrast, because there's movement in here. So it doesn't matter what colour you pick here, but as long as it's a dark colour. So something like the Indian Throne blue over here, or the indigo blue here would be perfect choices, or even the cobalt turquoise if you wanted more sort of greenish water. So I think we're probably going to lean towards blue. So I'm going to pick out the indigo, and that will help out balance out some of this aqua colour as well. So the indigo blue is PC901. That's what we're going to be adding in here. So the similar principle based on the hatching, like we did with these rocks here. The very heavily hatched areas I'm going to use the indigo for. But first things first, I do want to keep this nice and bright and lifted because we want this to be fairly colourful. So I'm going to take this little light aqua here, and I'm going to put in a lot of that everywhere. So even in the whitest parts here, so like this part here, I'll zoom this in a little bit to be able to see better. I am going to take that light aqua up into this sort of white foamy bit, but not all the way. So I'm going to leave some of the white of the paper there to help give us that illusion that this is, you know, this is a fairly active water that we've got here. So we've got quite muted colours here for our rocks and underwater, so we do want to keep it interesting. So I'm trying to stick to the bottom section of each of these white parts and leave the upper part the white part. So there we go. If we just take that little section there, I can show you what I'm going to do. So I've got my muted turquoise now, and I'm going to focus that in the hatched areas. So the likes of here. And I'm going to make sure that my coverage is quite even. So I don't want to be able to see the white of the paper in these areas, because again, that's going to help with the contrast in these lighter areas. If we make sure all the white of the paper is covered in the hatched areas, it's going to make those white areas pop out, you know, our intentional white areas pop out more. And that's what contrast does. So you can see there, that's a perfect example, that little part there. Okay, so you can see where I've gone with that. See where I've gone? It's terrible, I know, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Not sorry. No, you know me. I'm only pretending that I'm sorry. Right, so let's work our way down. Pip's way back outside again. I don't know what that dog's doing. Let's just work this section here. So chop it off there and I'll come down the way. It's too warm for you out there, baby girl. I've just put my hand on her head, and she's absolutely boiling. Oh, dog. So funny. She's not very happy just now because the crows are tormenting her as well. There's obviously been some baby crows poking about, and Pip's been they goad her. They do goad her. It's very, very funny. But Pip likes to chase them. She's no interest in catching them. It's just a herding thing. And she quite likes this game that especially the younger crows are willing to play with her, but they're actually just tormenting her now, and I think she's getting a bit fed up with it. So she started chasing rabbits instead. That's her new favourite game instead now. And again, just wants to chase them and not interested in catching them whatsoever. So with these parts here, I just want to keep it away from the outline, so the black outline here. Again, just to give it that sort of foamy edge feel. Okay, so we've got this section here now which we can work away on. Maybe add a little bit in here. Okay, and then I can go back to this muted turquoise and get to the hatched areas again. So again, I'll just do this whole section. Just make sure I get all the nooks and crannies. Not to be confused with grannies. Grannies and crannies are two different things. That's it. Speaking of grannies as well, that was something else that happened recently when I was packing away some of the stuff in our bedroom. You know, like you just kind of, there's like a unit at a time, like just do a bit at a time. Just get this little bit. Right now I'm changing to the indigo here, hold that thought. I'm changing to the indigo pencil here, and I'm really just looking to pick out, I've just realised I've missed a bit, goodness sake, Jem. I'm really just wanting to pick out the heaviest areas of hatching, or right down at the bottom. So for example, this part here where the hatching's light, I just want to run that indigo pencil down the bottom there, and then just blend it out a little bit into our muted turquoise. And I'm just going to do that all over. So I'll start up in this corner and you can follow what I'm doing. Yeah, so I decided to pull out all the stuff in the cupboard of my bedside table. So I've got like a drawer and then the bottom part's a cupboard. So I thought that'll be a good idea. And the day that I was doing that was the anniversary of my grandmother's death. I don't know where it's gone, honestly. Like I really don't. The time's just flown by. So I just wanted to kind of keep myself busy. So I set off on this cupboard. So I'm sitting going through all this stuff, and I came across this bundle of paper. I thought, and it was like a big old dusty envelope, like an A4 envelope. So I'm digging about in this envelope, and I just pulled all the contents of the envelope out, like into my lap. I was sitting cross-legged on the floor down the side of the bed, and I realised like a second too late that it was things that I had given to Gran, like over the 3 years maybe before she died. The thing that set me off was, number one, her wedding invitation that we sent her was in there, and we knew that she wasn't going to come to the wedding, so it was kind of like giving her place by sending her the invitation, and I'd written a little letter to her about the wedding and, you know, telling her not to worry, that we would make sure that everyone took videos, and we were trying to get a live feed with the iPad so that she wouldn't miss out. So there was that letter in there, and also all the drawings and everything that you guys did for her birthday that year before she died. And that was me. I was in pieces after that, and I must have sat there and bawled my eyes out for about 20 minutes. And I'm not a crier, like I am not a crier. And it was just one of those things, see, because it came out of nowhere, I just wasn't expecting it. So that was rough. Like I was like, whoa, that was rough. I had to deal with that the other night. It's okay though, I mean, I was fine after a couple of minutes, but I'm sure some of you will have experienced similar things where, you know, I think it's upsetting because you're not expecting it. Oh, that's the way I feel anyway. But yeah, that was wow, I was like total curveball there. So yeah, so didn't really know what to do with that at all. Okay, can you see where we're going with this now? When we get to the bottom here, it's up to you how you want to deal with it. I'm kind of like a bit nonchalant about it. I would be tempted to use the muted turquoise just underneath the, you know, the very bottom parts, and maybe just like sort of fade that out to a squiggle or something. Like, there you go. But you can see how that indigo is just setting this off nicely. Once I finish this little section, I'll zoom out so that you can see it in comparison to everything else. And it does look pretty good, I have to say. You can see it's just lifting that colour a little bit. So what we've got then is bright, muted, and down the bottom this is going to be bright as well. Although it's going to have the white over the top of it, we're going to use really vibrant colours. So that is going to set that off super, super nicely. Okay, with this section here, because obviously the rest of this is going to be very similar to what we've done here, but this section in here, there's two schools of thought here. The light could be shining through the water because we've established that the sun's setting, so it might shine through there and make that a really bright blue colour. Personally, Gem likes a gradient, so I am going to use the indigo and the light aqua, and I am going to create a gradient in the back of this area. So I'm going to start with the light aqua, and I'm going to put that down. So just a medium pressure, fairly even layer here as much as I can. And try and avoid all my wee fishies and whatever is going on here, because there's quite a lot going on in this little bit. See, for such a tiny part of this image. There's all these weeny little fish. These widdly little fish. This is the turbo bubbles, I call these. Obviously this penguin is swimming away and they've created a little jet stream behind them, so I'll try and avoid that as well, so we could do something with that. Personally, I think turbo bubbles is a much better phrase, but that's just me. Okay, so now that we've done that, I'm going to take this indigo colour, and again, just a light layer, I am going to blend these together. So want that darker colour down in there. Make it look as if it's kind of heading down into the depths. Again, don't have to press hard with these pencils at all, ever. It's really funny, I think it was Thea that was saying under the last video, or maybe it was under the first video, that she actually finds it frustrating because she just wants to smush it down, like press really hard from the get-go. I think that's really funny. It took me a lot of getting used to. I didn't actually like Prismacolors the first time I tried them. So if you're in that position, don't panic. They're a very different beast compared to other brands of coloured pencils, so do not panic if you don't feel like you feel like you're missing something or you're not really understanding what all the fuss is about, because that's what I was like. You just have to learn to use them and just identify and acknowledge that they are very different compared to other pencils. Okay, I'm not going to put any white pencil on that. I'm just going to leave it as is because, again, the light's probably hitting that, so it'll make it look a little bit more vibrant. It's got that nice sort of aquarium feel to it there, I feel. If I zoom this out now, I'm going to go back up here to my waves now, and we'll finish off the waves and we'll have a little bit of chat. And I shall tackle the other side in my spare time. I don't have a scrap of paper to hand this time. I normally do with Prismacolors. I mentioned that last time. I'm in that horrible space where I can't pack anything else up because I might ruin the world and miss things and I'll need to unpack things again. So yeah, we're in that space where I've kind of packed the cave up as much as I can for now. We're still 2 weeks to go, so after this weekend it's like go time and I will start packing absolutely everything, including myself. So but for the remainder of this week, because I'm filming this on Monday, so I'm closer to 3 weeks as I'm filming than 2, but by the time you guys see it, we're getting there. So basically, goals for this week are finish filming. I obviously want to film a little bit in advance just so that I can get on with the more pressing issues when it comes down to the wire. So really any spare time that I have this week during the day, or it's usually later in the afternoon, it depends how much work I've got to do with my proper job, any spare time that I've got there will be filming. So I want to get the rest of these videos filmed as soon as possible. The only spanner in the works with that is I'm waiting on something coming for the last video, so that will be dependent on that arriving, which is okay, that's fine, it's not really a hassle. Start changing addresses as well. It's the least favourite job in the world, so boring, but it needs to be done. And I just try and do them, like I've got a checklist, but I just try and do a couple every day because there's only so many automated telephone services I can deal with in a 24-hour period. I had a really nice chat the other day with somebody at Aviva. We have our truck insurance with Aviva, and I know that their call centre is in Glasgow. So 9 times out of 10, when you phone Aviva, you get a Scottish person, which is absolutely delightful. And Glasgow is full of call centres, by the way, for those of you that aren't familiar. Yes, there's a lot of call centres. When I phoned Aviva, this girl answered the phone and she's like, "Welcome to Aviva, how can I help you? My name's Jem." And I was like, that's hilarious. And I actually said that I didn't say hello. The first words out my mouth were, "That's hilarious." And I said to her, "This is my name's Jem too," and obviously I'm Scottish as well. So she thought that was hilarious too. So we had a little bit of a chinwag about whether she was with a J or a G and I was with a J or a G. So yeah, that was interesting. It was quite Quite a nice way to have a phone call. They're not usually as exciting as that when you're phoning your insurance company. Here's the thing with this part here. There's going to be a little bit of light heading through here. I am going to jump back into my pencil case and I'm going to go and grab the sunburst yellow. We used that in the last video as well, just to bounce the sunlight off these rocks here. Before we put any of more of our waves in, we need to plot a trajectory here. That's quite important. So I feel that this little avenue between these rocks is kind of, the sun's kind of like pointing that way slightly. You can see that by the way it's caught this rock here in particular. So I'm going to try and pick out a few areas, because if it's coming this way we want it to be against this bottom edge, like the yellow part's against the bottom edge of these waves. Now with this I would just say it's just a bit of sort of, you know, a step at a time, you know, put in a few little scribbles and see how you feel about it. I kind of want more than that, but I kind of don't at the same time. I'm going to be a bit braver, I'm going to add in a bit more here. Yeah, I think that's subtle enough. So now what we want to do is want to take the light aqua and we want to kind of like blend a little bit of this in, but we don't really want to take away from the yellow itself. I don't want to go over the top of the yellow too much, you know, I don't want to blend them together too much. And again, just the same as I did before with these other sections. Got interrupted there. I've kind of lost my stride a wee bit. Mr. Jem's just been at the doctor. He had an accident with his hand a couple of weeks ago and it ended up getting infected. So he's been on multiple courses of antibiotics and one thing and another. He was on the mend and he woke up this morning and his knuckle had started to swell up again. So he's just been back because they did tell him to go back straight away if anything started to swell. So he's now on to his third round of antibiotics. So he's not very happy. He's supposed to be going out for his leaving party next weekend. And obviously if he's on antibiotics, he'll not be able to drink. So he's not very happy. He's not very happy at all. The thing is as well, so we organised it so that I would drive so that he could drink. I keep telling him though, if he stops trying to like cut off his own hand, then it wouldn't be an issue. Like everything would be fine, but he keeps insisting on trying to like lop off one of his hands every couple of weeks. So, you know, he's just not very good at looking after his hands. And then I'm going to jump in with this indigo now and just finish this part off. Still got a lot to do. Time's kind of run away with me today. It's nearly 4:30. I should have been finished this about an hour ago, but it's just been one of those days today where stuff's been going on and I've still got to exercise. I'm trying my hardest to keep my wee routine, but everything's kind of getting a bit crazy now. But I really want to get some exercise in, so I'm going to try and get this finished. I've had the blinds down in the sunroom all day. I'm hoping it'll be cool enough to exercise in there because it's damn sure it's too warm to be doing it outside. Someone said to me like, why don't you do some yoga on your deck? And I'm like, that's fine if you want to fry, you know, if you enjoy being like a boil in the bag rice, then sure, be my guest. If you wait till later on, see if you wait till about 7 o'clock, the sun goes round and there's two great big trees on that side and it casts a lovely shadow across the bottom lawn. And you can go and do yoga down on the bottom lawn, but you need to wait till like 7:30 at night to do that. And see, by that time, I don't want to be doing yoga. Well, I want to be putting pyjamas on at that time. And there we have it. Okay, so let's take a zoom out now. We're starting to get there now. By the time I've done this other side, we're going to be ready to go for our bright colours down the bottom and finishing off our penguins. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you very much for coming and hanging out and joining in the fun today. As I mentioned last week, there will be more things in the stash shop, but it will be on Sunday, and I'll probably let you know what that is in Sunday's video as well. So if you're still on the lookout for a little bargain, or maybe you just want to snaffle a few items from the shop before we close up on the 25th, you can check that out over the course of the weekend. Who doesn't love a wee bargain? Have a great day, everyone, and bye-bye for now.